Thank you, Madam Chair. And obviously, this is a tragedy that's heartbreaking for all of us. And naturally, coming out of this, as we look for solutions, emotions are naturally high because we're all grieved by the fact that we see this in our nation. There's going to be 1,000 reasons why we're asking. The investigations are ongoing, obviously. Some answers, of course, will never, even the conclusions we could come up with will, of course, never answer the cry of a parent who's lost a child. And I think any of us who have children can understand that. Our hearts just break for what we've seen. As we move forward, we have to continue to figure out how we propose solutions that actually create solutions. Very often in this Congress, we do things out of a best of intent and have the worst of results. And a lot of data, there's a lot of data that points to the fact that gun control leads not to more safer communities, but to more dangerous communities. For example, one of the proposals out there right now is to raise the age of being able to own a rifle. And in our federalist society, we have many states, and so we're able to kind of test these things out. And as far as I know, the only peer-reviewed article, study that's been done on that, it was in the Journal of Law and Economics, talked about it and looked at it and said, if anything, there was a 6% increase from states who began to implement age requirements or raised age requirements. So we have to tread passionately but very carefully as we continue to address this from a policy perspective. I'd like to bring up a topic that I think needs to be added to this conversation, and Representative Heiss and Higgins touched on this quite a bit, because a lot of times here in Congress we'll measure, politicians like to get away with measuring our personal compassion. Usually it's on a spending bill, so we'll measure our personal compassion by how much money of other people's money we spend. And generally it's the more money we spend, the more compassion we have, in a sense. I've always found that absurd. In the same way as we do this, it would be wrong for us, just out of the sake of doing something, to measure our personal compassion by how much of other people's constitutional rights we take from them and give to the federal government. And it's important to point out in history that anytime a federal government takes authority, it's always for altruistic reasons. The danger comes when the next person in charge is, or what happens after that. And many times that power is taken under good intentions, and then used nefariously much later. So we have to be very careful about that. We have to keep history and context in mind in all of this. And the other thing I would say is that we should not think that any of this is monocausal. There's not one thing that caused this. There's a lot of things. But one thing I'd like to throw into the mix of this, because if there's a common denominator as we look across these, it's not age so much, it's not the firearm used or the type or even how it was required, as much as it is we see when we look at crime in our communities, when we look at the societal decline. We are in decline as a nation when it comes to the moral and societal decline in our nation. There's no doubt about it. And one of the biggest factors that is a common denominator across much of this is simply broken homes, fatherlessness. A DOJ study from the Journal of Research in Crime and Delinquency reports that the most reliable indicator of violent crime in a community is the proportion of fatherless homes. A 2019 meta-study in the Journal of Psychology, Crime, and Law found that growing up in single-parent families is associated with elevated risk of involvement in crime by adolescents. A 2019 study from the Pew Research Center finds that the U.S. has the world's highest rate of children living in single-parent households. The National Fatherhood Initiative has compiled some data, and it's Adolescents from fatherless homes are more likely to commit crime. They're more likely to end up in prisons. They're more likely to end up in poverty. And so we have to figure out, for a long time, our government has subsidized even and promoted policies that continue to break down the home. And we have to do what we can to make sure we come back to this. And I would just like to give whatever time remains to Ms. Swear to address the perjury charges that have been made against you.
The gentleman's time has expired.